Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Legislative Action Committee regularly scheduled call. Glad to have you on. I know we have some people still joining, but we'll get things underway out of respect for your time. There's a fair amount on the agenda, but again, just want to remind people that we are very interested in what's happening at the local level, so please give some thought to what kind of advocacy updates there are that you can report out on towards the end of the meeting. We really would like to hear you and what's going on. So let's get things started.
Can we do a couple of housekeeping items just to kind of update those who are new? So in the room here from MCAH, we have Eric, our Executive Director. My name is Laurel. Jason's here as well. And just to orient those of you who are new to our LAC call or who haven't called in for a while, on GoToWebinar, we do have a couple features that we want to share with you guys. We do have you muted, but if you have questions at any point, you can use the questions box in your panel, your admin panel, and send us a question. We will get to it as soon as we can and hopefully answer it to the best of our abilities or follow up with you. We also do have this webinar as a handout that you can download. The PowerPoint, it's actually a PDF. So you can download it and follow along, and that should give you access to all of the links that you'll be seeing on the screen. Or if you receive the agenda via email, all the links are available there as well. I think that covers it for our our housekeeping. But do feel free to send us questions at any point. And as Eric referenced, we do have a point in the agenda towards the end for you to chime in and let us know what's going on in your community. So we will work with you to either unmute you or you can type in your updates and we'll read them aloud to the group. But do think about anything that you want to notify us about so that when we get to that point, we're able to do so. Now I think we're ready, Eric.
Okay. Well, very good. I have nothing else to say except to hand it off to the next presenter. And we are moving into priority updates. Mm-hmm. And who's going to be handling that?
So I'll get us started. Yeah, I'll get us started with our priority updates. So these are items that we identified last year as things to focus on for the 2019-2020 state session. And so just to kind of give you guys an update of where we are with some of these items, the first one being source of income. This is a bill that we're working with now a couple of different legislators on. But it is the concept of trying to protect those who receive vouchers or other legal forms of income, such as subsidies or benefits, so that landlords cannot discriminate against them when they are considering them as a potential tenant. We have been working with Representative Wittenberg for the past several months and included this as a specific ask in our advocacy day in April. And we're still moving forward with this bill. It falls under the Landlord-Tenant Relationships Act, which does guarantee certain abilities for litigation if there is a discrimination case. But we've had two legislators, a representative and a senator, contact us in the last week or two who are interested in dropping this bill under the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. This is the more natural fit for this protection, as it would just make source of income another protected class for Michiganders who are trying to access housing. But because of the political kind of mood around Elliott-Larsen, we were attempting to go a different direction. But the fact that we now have 3 potential draft bills that our legislators are interested in dropping, we're in a very interesting place of seeing where this can go. The Department of Civil Rights is the one that has pushed this under Elliott-Larsen, and they're very keen to kind of see this move forward in whatever direction makes sense. So we're working with them. We're working with landlord associations and property owners associations to try and boost this up and move it forward this year or in the future. I think that we want to see it drop this year, but won't see it pass. This is something that I think we're going to have a lot of conversations on, a lot of education around. And so in the meantime, as we're working on getting this just introduced in whatever form makes the most sense, we are calling on our advocates to start working with landlords that you have a relationship with who accepts voucher holders to start collecting testimonies. And these are written documents that a landlord can prepare that just says why they participate in a voucher program, what are the benefits to them, how it has worked for them. And we feel that this is supporting documentation that will really help our legislators understand that this is not a penalty towards small business owners or large business owners. We don't have a template or any materials at this point. We've just started the process, but we're very happy to work with anybody who is interested in collecting those testimonials with us. So if you are interested, please let us know, and we will work with you to try and start collecting some of that information. But overall, very excited that there's a lot of interest in this. This is something that we've been talking about for a while, and I think, as I said, has a long road ahead of us, but glad to get started with it. Jason, did we have a question on that before we move on?
No.
Okay. So Landlord Mitigation Fund is another concept that we put forward this year. It was not included in our Advocacy Day ask, but it is something that we've been talking with legislators about, especially those who work in appropriations. It's the idea of setting aside a pool of money from the state that can be accessed by landlords who rent to tenants who they might not normally rent to. So as an example, a voucher holder, someone with a criminal record, someone with poor credit history or poor rental history. And this fund allows a landlord to access money if they incur any losses in damages or loss of rent. And we've seen other states do this with a relatively small budget and be successful because, as all of you on the call probably are aware of, these tenants don't necessarily cause any additional damages or loss of rent as another tenant, but we're trying to work against the stigma and the stereotype that landlords have against these tenants. So I'm very excited to see that this was picked up by the House during their appropriations under general government, and there is a line item that was passed in the House for a $500,000 pool that would be managed by MCAH, and the infrastructure would be built by MCAH, including a website and other items that are necessary to make this successful. And then any funds remaining after that infrastructure is built is going to be available for matches to local risk management funds. So I know there are several communities that either have this or are working on this. They would be able to access this pool of funding once it's up and running. The proposal is that the completion date won't be for several years still. 2024 is the completion date. So these funds would be available for that period. We're working with MCAH. We have some calls or some meetings set up to try and understand if this were to move forward, how MCAH would work with it, how we can support them, how we can start getting this up and running so that communities would have access to it. Now, it's currently just passed by the House, which for anyone who's familiar with our legislative process and appropriations, there has to be a complete match between the House and the Senate. So since the Senate did not include this, then it's still something that we're advocating for. It's by no means passed. We're going to be continuing to advocate among the Senate and with our governor to make sure that this is something that is included in the final budget. But we're excited to see it introduced in the House at the very least and to see where this may go. If this is not passed during appropriations this year, we are still wanting to see a risk mitigation fund move forward. This is not our only chance. We are continuing to do research on what makes the most sense for our communities, and we'll continue to advocate for this concept moving forward. Want to talk about Vital Docs?
Always. I enjoy. Okay, so what Laurel's referencing, this is Jason, by the way, and what Laurel's referencing is House Bills 4152 and 4153. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the content of the bills, they're a package and they're focused on how folks access their birth records that are held at the MCAH Central Registry here in Lansing. And so at the core of it, it is the bills are focused on making access easier through the county clerk's office, and also more affordable in that the county clerks would not only be able to access these documents, but then they would be able to charge their rate as opposed to charging the MCAH registry rate. So it's a move in the right direction. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how the fee structures are currently set up, right now the county clerks are charging anywhere from $5 to $30 depending on where you are, and MCAH Central Registry is charging $34 as the starting price, but then normally it's about $30 to $40 of shipping and processing and handling fees associated with getting your records. So there was a whole lot of flurry of activity at the kind of going into spring around the bills, which is way better than we saw last year when the bills were introduced and then didn't even make it into committee. So they have in fact made it through the House and are over in the Senate. They had an initial hearing, but at this point it's unclear what the timetable is for when the Senate committee will be rehearing the bill. So it's a kind of hurry up and wait situation, but obviously as we hear more, get more information, we'll keep everybody in the loop. And want to give a huge shout out to the co-chairs of the ID task force. They've been very flexible as there's been various hearings coming up. They've been very good about making it out to the hearings and providing testimony on behalf of the ID task force. So they've been very good partners to work with in that regard. And I think that's about it.
I'm going to pause really quick. I got an email that the audio is not very strong. So I just want to see if anyone else is having problems with their audio or if it's just the one caller. When we have audio problems, there's not usually a ton we can do on our end. Usually it requires the person having trouble to log off and log back in. But if quite a few people are having trouble, then we can investigate. So if you can send us a message, let us know using the chat or the question box. Let us know if you're having any trouble hearing us, and we'll do what we can to kind of navigate an improvement for you. So I haven't seen any questions come in regarding the content so far, right, Jason?
That's correct.
All right. Then let's go ahead and go to our state updates. So this is where we just kind of inform and update everyone on anything that doesn't necessarily fall within our policy priorities, so things that we report out on every call. Funding is a policy priority for us, but just because of where we are in the appropriations process, I kind of moved it to this section just to give you guys a broader sense of where we are with the state budget. So we are towards the end of what is typically the spring session, where we usually recess for summer. That means that in past years we've had a budget by about this time period. We do not have a budget this year, in part because the governor introduced her recommendations late, in part because it was a completely new legislature, and in part because we have some major funding opportunities and issues that the governor's pushing for, including the roads and education, which has slowed down the process a little bit. I will not be commenting on any of those high priority issues from the administration other than to acknowledge that it's kind of slowed down the process. But the two budgets that we're really following closely this year are the Health and Human Services budget and the general government budget. So starting with general government, the item in that budget that we're following is the risk mitigation. This is not typically a budget where we see dollars related to homeless services, but this year we did see the risk mitigation fund in the House. As I said earlier, it was passed in the House, not included in the Senate, which means that as these budgets go to conference committee where there are designated representatives and senators to hash out the details, there's opportunity for us to be advocating for this fund to be included in the final budget and then to be passed by the governor. So it has been referred to conference committee by the Senate, and we know that Senators Thomas, Victory, and Irwin, so two Republicans and a Democrat, are on the conference committee from the Senate side, and then we have Reps. Huizinga, Leitner, and Saddle, who are going to be representing the House. If those are your senators or representatives, this would be a great time to contact them and let them know that you support this item, the Landlord Risk Mitigation Fund, because it is rather a closed room when these negotiations happen. So there's not opportunity for public testimony. There's not opportunity to really have a lot of one-on-one engagement with these legislators. But we can still be making calls and letting their offices know that there are items that we support as they are trying to hash out the details. Now, on the Health and Human Services side, we have several items that we've been following and advocating for. Again, the House and the Senate have passed different versions of their budget, and so they will be going to conference. The senators on the conference committee for the Health and Human Services budget.
Can you repeat the reps?
I will.
For the previous stuff.
Yes. So the senators for the general government conference appointees, Senators Thomas, Victory, and Irwin. The representatives are Huizinga, who I always pronounce incorrectly. Huizenga, thank you.
Gesundheit.
Huizenga, Leitner, and Savo.
Thank you.
I don't have their districts, but I can send that out if anybody is interested, but not sure who their representatives or senators are.
You just ask for names.
Just names. All right. So that was for general government. For the Health and Human Services Conference appointees, we have Senators McGregor, Thomas, and Hertel, Representatives Whiteford, Green, and Hammoud. So again, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat. The items that we're following on this budget include the emergency shelter program, per diem rate. We did see in lame duck of last year an $18, which was a $2 increase that was passed just for that year. We're seeing the House did annualize that, so moving forward it would be an $18 per diem rate for ESP. Senate, I thought, had annualized the $18, but now I'm seeing that perhaps they did not. So this is, again, another opportunity for us to contact, especially on the Senate side, and let them know that that's a very important issue that we would like to see continued, so that $18 is the regular rate every year moving forward. Fortunately, one thing that is less up in the air for us is the birth certificate reimbursement that the governor requested. That was $226,000 that the administration wanted to see as reimbursement to DHHS and to local county clerks, so that service providers who were covering the cost of birth certificates and vital documents for literally homeless individuals, they could receive the reimbursement. That was included in both the House and the Senate at the full rate. So we're excited about that. The next item is the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program. The House passed an additional $1 to $1.5 million that we did not see in the Senate for this program. So again, we would obviously support that for what the House put forward, and like to see the Senate include that additional $1 to $1.5 million as well. And there's some other technical issues that are in the House or in the Health and Human Services budget, but those are the 3 things that if you were going to be active with us on advocating during this conference period, that I would definitely encourage you to think about contacting your rep or your senator and let them know that you support those items, especially if your rep or senator is one of those who are on the conference committee. Now, in terms of timeline, the House has recessed until after July 4th. It's unclear to me if they will be back regularly after that time or if they will just have some tentative dates. Usually during the summer, they recess for the whole summer, just have to kind of call in once a month to kind of meet requirements, and they don't come back until after the summer. This year it's a little unclear how they're going to be moving forward, so we may have some time to really put in some calls, or they may just be absent for the next several weeks with no one answering the phone. We will have to see and let you know as we learn what the timeline looks like for this budget. Any questions about the budget other than to repeat the legislators on conference, Jason?
There was a request whether or not we could send out any type of brief notes after this, maybe highlighting some of the things that you were just discussing.
Yeah, we can definitely send out some of the more actionable items to the full list. Yeah, I know it's hard to kind of hear everything and get all your notes down, so we can definitely do that.
And I also, and just as a reminder, we do have the PowerPoint with at least this rough sketch available for download in the handout section. So please feel free to avail yourself of that.
And we're recording, and we'll send out the link for the recording once it's up.
True.
Which, not always fun to go through an hour-long recording just to catch notes, but it's available. And it's something you can share with your network. All right. So let me move on to the rest of our state updates. Some good, some bad, some in between. Medicaid work requirements, this is something that passed last legislative session. It was a request from the federal government for implementing work requirements for those who receive Medicaid and fit within a certain criteria. There's a lot of pushback, this is happening with several other states around the country, and this is a federal administrative push to impose work requirements for those who receive benefits. It's something that is moving forward in the state. So based on Senate Bills 362 and 363, there is an effort to try and, I'm not going to say weaken, but at least make it some more exemptions, find some new ways with the reporting requirements so that it's less burdensome for those who fall within this criteria. So Senate Bill 362 was introduced by a Democrat, and it changes the timeline for for reporting requirements. As it was, the beneficiary had to report out on their work activities for the month on the 10th of the month. And if they missed that deadline, then after 3 months, they were going to be removed from Medicaid. The Senate Bill 362 now changes that from the 10th of the month to the last day of the month, just giving the enrollee a little bit more time to do their reporting requirements. And it also allows a little more flexibility for verifying compliance after they miss their date for reporting, so that they're not automatically, after 3 months, removed from Medicaid. Senate Bill 363 was introduced by a Republican, so this is a bipartisan attempt to try and work on these work requirements. And it allows an exemption so that if some of the reporting data is available through another source, then DHHS can access that and doesn't require a recipient to do the reporting process. So again, both of these would make it a little bit easier, a little more leniency for enrollees to report out on their the work requirements that would be imposed through Medicaid. They have passed the Senate rather quickly, have gone to the House, but as I said, with them being on recess, this will not be taken up immediately. But I do see it moving, potentially moving quickly, depending on how the House is talking about these. One thing to note is that as advocates are coming out, and I've seen the National Association for Social Workers, I've seen the Michigan League for Public Policy come out and do public comments on this, these still are work requirements that we do not support. It makes it easier, it changes the reporting structure, but work requirements for Medicaid is still something we're seeing evidence does not work. A study came out of Arkansas, which was one of the first states to impose this, just last week, that showed that the uninsured rate rose 4% during the first 6 months of the work requirements, and employment did not rise along with it. Therefore, there's no proof at this moment that this is going to be a standard that increases employment for anybody, which is what the administration was arguing. So there's still a lot of concerns about whether or not Medicaid work requirements should actually exist in our state. We support Senate Bills 362 and 363 because at the very least they're a step in the right direction. But we'll let you know what happens as it goes through the House, if it's taken up quickly or if it's something that receives kind of pushback or any substitutes, because this will have an impact on those experiencing homelessness or low income who are enrolled in Medicaid. Any questions on that? Okay. I'll just go through the next three rather quickly, just to get them on your radar. House Bill 4587 was introduced by Rep. Shepard. It is allowing for a $50 or 10% of rent, whichever one, or no greater than $50 or 10% of rent fee for those who are being evicted. It's something that we've passed along to some of our legal partners to kind of see what their take is on it. We don't have any timeline on this one, but it is something for you guys to know about, another kind of fee for those who are facing eviction in their communities. House Bill 4679, this is following the national trend of imposing restrictions on those who are not a legal resident of the United States, either a United States citizen or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Our state bill is focused on MSHDA homeownership loans and does make ineligible someone who does not fit within that criteria. It was introduced by a lot of Republicans, and it has been referred to the Committee on Financial Services, but I have not seen a date for it to be taken up in committee. So as that moves forward, if it moves forward, we will let you know. And then finally, for those of you who have been kind of working on legislation for a while now, The bedbug bill may sound familiar to you. This is something that Representative Iden has taken up in previous sessions. It changes the way that bedbugs are kind of monitored and the responsibilities between the landlord and the tenant for who has to pay for it if bedbugs do, and if an infestation does happen. I am hearing rumors that it is going to drop soon. This is before the recess, so now I'm not quite sure about the timeline. So what I've linked for you guys is the 2017 bill. It does place the cost of treating bedbugs on the tenant if the tenant is found responsible for the infestation, which was the major sticking point in 2017. Obviously, that's an undue burden on a tenant because it's very hard to prove when an infestation occurs. So this is something we'll be following, keeping track of. There was a lot of pushback in 2017. A lot of really strong advocates come out against this. So I suspect it'll be similar this year, but it is something to be on our radar. And if and when it drops, I will send you guys the current language. And that's it for state updates.
Well, I suppose you want to hear about federal updates now.
That is what's on screen.
I was lulled to sleep by the presentation by Laura.
Oh, thanks. Is that boring, eh?
No, I just have a sense of calm now after that report out.
Yeah, everything is going to be A-okay, guys.
So a lot happening at the state level, and now we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about the federal level. Some of this we've touched on already. Some of it will be new. One thing I do want to talk about that is a rehash of something that's been mentioned before relates to the budget, and that's the question about spending caps, which will be necessary if indeed we're looking at having any increases or actually to protect the budget from a mandatory 9% decrease that was actually initiated through the Budget Control Act of 2011. I know most of you remember that you know, details that come back to haunt you every day. You think about it all the time. But it is something that we do need to keep in mind, that budget deal, as most of you may recall, did put in place a mechanism to cap expenditures. And so we're dealing with automatic cuts that would take place across the board if indeed the House and Senate are not able to agree upon increasing the spending caps. So please pay attention to that. There are a group of 12 senators that have sent a letter to congressional leadership asking them to lift the budget caps that were mandated by that Control Act of 2011. We'll see whether or not there's some traction. I think we're in a situation where both sides of the aisle realize what the impact would be, how it would affect their districts, and how it would play out if indeed there were these mandatory cuts taking place across the board. So I think that there is an interest in trying to lift the cap. The question is, what will that cap end up being through negotiation? So stay tuned, folks. So talking about the budget, we reported previously that the House has released a budget. Back in May, they actually had a spending bill that they had introduced. There's been some work done on that to try to get that passed. If you look at the budget that is being shown there on the screen, that's something put together through the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which does a great job of showing you what the 2019 budget was, what the president is proposing, and what is actually included in the bill that the House is currently voting on right now. As you'll see, the executive budget is pretty lean. It's really gutting a lot of programs. The House disagrees with that in most cases very ardently, and so you'll see increases in a number of significant areas to that budget. I'll just highlight a few. You can see them there, but the tenant-based rental assistance seeing a significant increase, funds for public housing capital funds as well as our operating funds being increased, community development fund increasing, home investment partnerships, homeless assistance grants, project-based rental assistance, housing for elderly and for persons with disabilities. So across the board, increases for a majority of those program areas, which we believe are necessary. So I won't belabor that one, but I will just indicate to you that the House has begun considering a 5-bill spending package, which is a minibus as opposed to the omnibus, which would be a completely comprehensive collection of the spending bills. So these are the 5 bills that are looking at affordable housing and community development programs at HUD and USDA. So we're waiting for that action to be taken. We'll report out on that. Then, of course, there will be negotiations with the Senate, depending on what they put forth. Indications are that they also will be coming in with figures that are significantly higher than what the president's budget reflects. So hurry up and wait. Again, that linchpin is what the spending cap will be, because that will dictate how the rest of the budget is put together on the House and Senate side. Okay, moving on. Let's see, what do you want to talk about next? Okay, well, let's talk about the proposed mixed status rule, that HUD is putting forth. Wanted to make sure everybody's aware that there's a day of action coming up on Wednesday that you can get involved with. We would encourage you to do that. The proposed rule that we're talking about, most of you should be aware of what this is, but in essence, this is a rule that would prohibit mixed status families, or families that would have people who are here legally or have citizens from sharing a house or home with an individual who is not here with legal status. And so what's being proposed is about 25,000 families would be affected. About 55,000 kids would actually be facing eviction through this rule. So we are trying to get people active to be speaking out against this, because we do think it has some pretty significant detrimental effects on those families. We do know that then that will potentially create more of a burden in communities as well, because those individuals will be looking for alternate sources of assistance. Not to mention the fact that it's a real humanitarian question as well. So we're asking people to participate in the day of action. Is there something that we're going to be putting out leading up to it, or on the day of, Laurel?
Yeah.
What's it going to be?
So we have a Facebook event. So if you follow us on Facebook, you can find that there, or you can just go look at it really quickly on keepfamiliestegether.org. We're working with the Michigan League for Public Policy to get this out to advocates and to organizations who work with these populations. We'll be putting all of the information on there that you need to be able to submit a public comment. The deadline to actually do that is July 9th. So on June, you don't have to have your comment prepared on June 26th. It's a good opportunity to kind of just use the Keep Families Together hashtag on social media to try and contact your members of Congress and let them know about this. The House has passed their own bill that is against this proposed mixed status rule. And so the House is actively pushing against this. The Senate has not done so. But it's still a good time for us to be contacting them and letting them know that this is something that concerns us about how it can impact Michigan. The League for Public Policy did put up an excellent blog that talked about the impact and what that will look like. That is linked in our Facebook event page, so you can go and look at that. During this week, we'll be putting up resources. I believe there is a mid-afternoon webinar that the national partners will be doing, and I will link that on the Facebook page as well. So that's going to be, or the Facebook event. So that's going to be the best place to access all of this information that we're coordinating from Michigan. But that website that you see on your screen is the national effort to try and get the public comment number up pretty high. So if you need any information from our national partners, that would be a good place to go to get that.
Okay, moving on. The next item is relating to another HUD proposed rule, the equal access rule change. Many of you would be aware of the rule that was put in place previously. HUD is now reviewing that and wanting to nullify that rule, which basically provides a combination based on sexual identification through providers such as shelter operators. This would prohibit them from providing that, I believe.
It would allow the shelters to use their own judgment, basically not requiring them to provide services, but allowing them to use other criteria to establish a policy.
Right. So undermines the original rule that was put forth. and we believe that this can also have some negative impacts as well. So we're asking you to be vigilant about that, and I don't know if there are any efforts that you've seen where there's going to be some kind of formal action taken to have people reach out.
So this is an interesting one in terms of the timing of it. Carson testified before Congress that this was not anything that they were considering, and then the very next day indicated that they were going to be looking at this rule. So there is a rather strong statement from 6 or 7 national partners against it. The House, again, has passed legislation against it. The Senate has not. I have not seen the public comment open for this, but I suspect that as soon as that is available, if it is available, it's going to be something that is going to be put out there pretty strongly by the national partners, so we will share that with you guys. I know several communities, including some folks on the call, have already put together their comments, so it would not hurt to be prepared to submit something once that is available. And we will continue to give you guys updates from our national partners about the best way to get that out there. As long as we're talking about public comment, I do want to just make one more comment about the best way to kind of do that. There are a lot of templates out there, and if you are looking at the mixed status rule and submitting a comment, going to that website will give you templates for how you can basically just do a standard form to submit your comments, but really trying to provide local context and personalize your comments is going to be the best way to get those comments counted. When a form is sent in that is exactly the same as 100 others, they tend to be dismissed and they are not counted in the final count. So you have to have a certain amount of individual personalized language in your comments for it to be counted. So just as you're thinking about different things that are happening at HUD, and there's a lot that you can be taking action on and commenting on right now, do think about how you can personalize and provide the local context so that it really makes an impact when you submit it and is in the final count.
Very good. Moving on to the Affordable Housing Task Force, just wanted to make you aware of the fact that the original bill that was introduced last year has been reintroduced by Senators Young, who's a Republican, Angus King, who's an independent, and Maria Cantwell, who is a Democrat, along with 13 other bipartisan senators. In essence, what it would do is create a bipartisan affordable housing task force to better understand and respond to America's housing affordability crisis. And so it would be tasked with evaluating and quantifying the impact of the lack of affordable housing on other sectors like education, health, nutrition, transportation, and so on. It would also evaluate and quantify the costs incurred by federal, state, and local programs due to the lack of affordable housing. And then lastly, would make recommendations to Congress on how to use affordable housing to improve the effectiveness of other federal programs and improve life outcomes. So sounds like a pretty big challenge, but this is a very interesting effort because what it will do is try to pull some forces together on a bipartisan basis to really put affordable housing front and center, to be doing research and trying to come up with some solutions, as opposed to some piecemeal work that's done that may be out of context and may or may not be based on research that supports actions that are being proposed. So this is a pretty big deal, and we're excited about it moving forward. It does make me think, I'm diverging here a little bit, but it makes me think about how important that could be in the state of Michigan as well if we were to pursue that. That is something that's been kicked around a little bit, at least internally. But for now, we're looking at that federal level task force, and we'll keep you posted if indeed that does come together. Additional MICA updates?
Yeah, so we included this just as a reminder that we still are in the phase of rolling out and training folks about the fee waiver process. Of course, this all goes back to the passage of SB 404 the tail end of last year. So we have a final webinar coming up. I say final, meaning that we're just taking a break through July and August, so it's not a truly final webinar, but the team will be presenting this Thursday at 1 o'clock. You can see the registration link there in the packet. So if anybody on the call knows of colleagues, or even if you wanted to share it, whether with your agency or with your COC, please do so, although we certainly been good about getting emails out. We've already trained upwards of 550 people on the webinars that have been held so far, and the registration so far for this one is much lower than any of the others, so it seems like we're finally getting to the saturation point, which is a good thing. So anyway, wanted to include that as an opportunity since it was coming up this week.
And a reminder that the link is active on the PDF and the agenda that was sent out if you want to register for that. Obviously, you can't click on it on your screen. In addition to that, just want to remind everyone or let everyone know that the National Low Income Housing Coalition released their annual Out of Reach report. This is a fantastic tool. We use it in our advocacy all the time here at MCAH. It discusses the disparity between the amount of rent in our communities versus the wages for those who are low income minimum wage earners. And so on the screen, you can't see it very well, but this is just a little snapshot of what they have prepared on the left, the Michigan state ranking of how we're doing with regards to rent and wages. You can see that definitely there are states who are doing worse than us, but we're not faring too well. According to their research and data for the state, and this is state average, a minimum wage earner really needs to earn $17.25 an hour in order to afford a 2-bedroom fair market rental. That changes very much by county. So on the right side, you can see an infographic that we have put together here at MCAH, and it is something that we're using with our decision makers to educate them at the regional and county level about what people are really experiencing when it comes to housing and wages. So the data in the middle under housing, if you're able to see that smaller print, this is for Washtenaw County, which is the most expensive place to live in our state. And so a 2-bedroom rental actually requires closer to a $22 an hour minimum wage if you're working just 40 hours a week at minimum wage. At our current minimum wage, you have to work 93 hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom FMR rental. So this is a really strong data report when we're talking to our legislators about what people are facing in their communities when they're trying to rent an apartment or a home. We have sent out with our partner CEDM a press release to state media outlets and have gotten a little bit of interest, but not a ton. And so we are making available a template press release to our local communities if you are interested in submitting this to your media. And we've also have this infographic on the right that we're able to customize based on the county that you reside in if you want to include that in any of your outreach. And that can be outreach to media, that can be a blog that you do, that can be something that you send to your legislators. Basically, we want to make this available so that we're getting more media, more public interest in what we see as a very concerning issue for our state. So I'm your contact on that. This is Laurel again. You definitely should have received emails from me at some point and have my contact information. But if this is something that you want to participate in at any level and want access to some of this information, please let me know. And I think that's it for our MCAH updates. Do we have anything else? No. So this is your chance to tell us what's going on locally.
It's your time to shine. Brag a little bit.
So for those of you who are new, because we do have a number of new faces, proverbially around the table, if you are interested in saying something, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. And actually, we have a couple of folks who have already raised their hands. So Julie, I think let's start with you. I see your hands raised.
Let's make sure that you're in a place that doesn't have a lot. Oh, she's had her hand raised for a while.
Oh, she has, and now she just unraised her hand. So, Julie, yeah, I guess Julie, let us know if you would like to make a comment. Kelly, I see your hand is raised as well.
Also been raised for a while.
Also been raised, and now your hand just went down. Okay. All right. So I assume that we have no hands up at this point.
Other questions, though? I'm sorry. Ask if people have questions.
Yeah, take your time. We've got a couple minutes before the call is set to be done. So if you have updates that you want to give, you can type it out if you're not in a place where we can unmute your microphone, or if you're just not comfortable talking. some examples of things that we've heard about in the past. I know that there's been a lot of action out of like Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor with some really great advocacy that the groups are doing there. So if there is anything that you want to let us know, it doesn't have to be advocacy related necessarily, but let us know what's happening locally so that we can kind of just all be informed.
It doesn't necessarily have to be anything that you or your organization is involved in, but something that you think others might want to hear about with respect to advocacy or issues that are taking place in your community.
Yeah.
Well, Laurel, you're getting a shout out from Washtenaw for providing their customized out of reach report. So they are very grateful that they don't have to do anything. So
that's just because I kept blasting Amanda during her vacation.
Oh, she's giving you kudos. So well done there.
Yeah, we have a couple counties that are already participating in media outreach for the out of reach. So we're happy to work with anyone else who wants to. Thank you, Amanda.
So, so Deb Hendren at Community Housing Network is looping us in on some insider information that they just received an email from HUD that they will likely be opening up some public comment around reassessing FMR rates. So no details at this point, but it sounds like it is something that HUD is taking a good look at and will likely be doing sometime later this year.
Deb, you guys out in Oakland are doing amazing advocacy work, and I just want to do a shout out to you guys for everything that you've been able to put together in the past, 9 months, year or so, and just how great you guys have been as a partner for us, so thank you.
So is that a private email that the director sent to you, by the way?
Well, they've actually been engaged with the Detroit office for a while now around this, and she's saying comment by July 5th. She's sending it to us right now.
Okay, right around the corner.
So we can forward it to
Yeah, if it's public, we'll make sure we get it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Deb. Thanks for letting us know.
Anything else? If you have things that you remember after the call or that you want to share with us privately or just whatever, feel free to send it by email and we can address it in our next call, or we can just work with you individually on any advocacy issues that are happening in your community. And I think
that's probably it.
That is it. There are no more questions, no more comments.
So we do have another call scheduled for July. We've had a lower turnout this time. I'm assuming summer, people are out of the office. So we may keep that meeting. We may postpone it, but we are scheduled for July 22nd for our next call.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being on. Take care. Keep in touch.
Bye.